I'm your host, Diana Longrie. Thank you for tuning in. Off the Record News is brought to you live from the SCC studios out of White Bear Lake. And through a cooperative agreement, this program is also simultaneously broadcast to those studios out of the Roseville viewing area, the CTV studios. And we are also live in St. Paul out of the SPNN studios. So we're very happy to have our live cable cast audience watching this evening out of approximately 28 communities in the Northeast metropolitan area. Now this evening, as I mentioned, we are live and it is April 27th, 2016. So on this live broadcast, we have our number up so you can call in with any questions or comments that you may have either for myself or my guest this evening. Now we also do re-cablecast at other dates and times in other studios such as in Stillwater, Evergrove Heights, and other studios where this program may be cablecast. And so if you find yourself watching on a date that is not a live cablecast, well, don't despair. If you have questions or comments, I'm sure that my guests will, during the show, give some information on how you can either contact them or somebody about tonight's issue about hidden medical assistance liens. And also, if you have ideas for me for show topics, you can get a hold of me on Facebook 24/7. Now this evening we are going to have a very important program that if you've been paying attention in the news, whether or not it's been in the commercial news broadcasts or it's been in the newspaper, there's been talk in Minnesota about medical assistance liens that have been attached to people's property, their real estate, and they didn't even know that it was happening. And that there are a number of bills being introduced at the state legislature to fix this issue. But I have with me this evening 4 individuals that have been very active in trying to, first of all, bring about awareness of this problem that is affecting many, many small business owners throughout the whole state of Minnesota. And also, they are working on trying to resolve this problem with the legislature, actually speaking and testifying at the legislature on this issue to make our legislators aware of the unintended consequences of certain laws that went in effect both at the state level and the federal level. So with that, I warmly welcome all of my guests here this evening, and I'm going to let them each introduce themselves to you folks out there. So Rick, why don't we start with you first?
Okay, thank you, Diana. My name is Rick Rayburn. I'm from the Willow River area. We got involved in this because in November of 2015, my wife and I found out that we had a $30,000 lien placed against our property for approximately 22 months of medical assistance.
Yeah. Scott, introduce yourself, please.
I'm Scott Killerud. I'm from Willow River, Minnesota. And I myself am not quite in the demographic that is affected by this, but my wife Ellen is over 55, and we were impacted to the tune of, well, we were initially told $11,000 lien, since blossomed into a $13,000 lien.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. And John, introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, hi. My name is John Lutz. I'm a dairy farmer, crop farmer, beef farmer down in Hugo, Minnesota. Our farm's been in our family for over 100 years now. I found out just in December that I had a lien against all my estates. We got on, I was told we had to come up with some insurance plan, so we did back in 2014. And I found out 2 years later that we're up to about $40,000 now that we owe. So it's kind of frustrating, and not much going to be said about that. Is hopefully we can do something about it here.
Mm-hmm. So. And Claudia, please introduce yourself.
I'm Claudia Foussard, and I live in St. Paul, and from St. Paul, and I have, when I first found out about it, I had $17,000, and I'm up to $20,000 of liens.
Yeah. And for our viewers out there, you may not know too much about what a medical assistance lien is or how it occurred and whatever. So we're going to start the first part of the show off by giving some of that background information, and then from there go into talking about what is happening today at the state legislature, and maybe what you should do in calling your state legislators and encouraging them to vote in a way to take care of this problem. So who would like to start first with giving a little background information on, first of all, what a medical lien is, and then we got to talk about what kind of legislation both at the state and the federal level got us to this point, and how come nobody knew about it? Who wants to take the ball?
I could start it off.
Okay, very good.
Okay, the liens we're talking about are placed upon the estates of people who are 55 and older who are eligible for medical assistance. When you enroll in the medical assistance plan, like most of us did here through MNsure, the liens were then applied. Excuse me.
Well, and when you say 55 or older, it's between 55 and 65, correct? Because once somebody reaches 65, then they're eligible for Medicare. So then it doesn't apply anymore. So we're talking about a segment of our population that they already are looking at, winding down their careers, their maybe even their businesses, trying to sell it, trying to maybe transfer it to their children if they've got a business like a farm.
Right.
And so you're looking at the last 10 years really of your earning employment part of your life, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah, and then you were mentioning that this lien then it was because, and I think Scott, you mentioned this, that you had signed up for your wife had insurance through MNsure, and somehow or other it morphed into something else, which was not really insurance; it was something else.
Well, in the case of our instance, it was. We went to the MNsure site to find an affordable plan. We had a high deductible Blue Cross plan prior to the Affordable Care Act, and then we went hoping that there'd be something more affordable on the MNsure site. We submitted our financial figures, and it sort of ended up through these two navigators that helped us with the application. Turned out that we qualified, I guess the term is, for medical assistance. There really was no option. If you're wanting to pay a premium, you don't have that option because medical assistance is set up to be quote unquote a free program for the very, very, very lowest echelon of wage earners in our society, I guess. And we ended up being thrust into the MA pile, and we have lived to regret it ever since, because in doing so, the premiums that are supposedly paid on our behalf are these very large, as they're called, capitation amounts. It's a figure that a term I'd never heard before. And in the case of my wife, Ellen, it was around $750 a month just for her, the capitation amount. And then that goes directly against your estate month by month.
And that, of course, is exactly what you were describing, Rick, is that then this medical assistance lien, they're keeping a tab, so to speak.
Right, a running tally.
And they look at then what real estate you have, and then they file paperwork that says if and when you're going to sell that property, well, then they get paid back, correct? Is that simply how it works, or is there more complication than that?
Well, it's actually a little, not quite so. When the liens are not placed until you're deceased. So you can still sell your property while you're living. So that's kind of, I guess, a benefit, if you could call it that. And traditionally, the liens were only placed on people that were in long-term care. That would be like nursing homes, and that type of institution. Then in basically 93, the federal government initiated a statute that required the states to recover for long-term care for any age, and then also the states were allowed to pick up an option that let the states apply the liens to people 55 and older for all services, not just long-term care as what was traditionally. Most people are familiar with the nursing home clause. When you get into long-term care, you're probably going to lose what assets you have. But the 55 option actually made it so that the 55 and older people would be the liens would apply to them for anything, going to the doctor for a checkup, or like Scott said, the premiums that are applied monthly by and those are paid to the HMOs like UCare or Blue Cross.
And I can see where, as Scott, you were describing it, and John, I'm sure that you can ascribe to this as well, that with small business owners, I mean, you're putting a lot of your investment over the years into your land, into your assets. And so I'm a small business owner, and I know that at the end of the year, I'm trying to maximize my deductions so I can minimize my income so that I'm limiting the amount of the tax bill. I mean, that's what all small business owners do. And there are ways that you're encouraged to put your investment into your business, into your property. And so, as Scott was saying, okay, on paper then it looks like you have low income, whereas in reality, it's a little different than that. And maybe you can go into that a little bit, John.
Well, yeah, as a business owner, you do that. At the end of the year, you do tax planning. You pay an accountant to do that. And you do that to try and figure out ways to improvise your business. So you spend your whole life doing that. Well, now at 55, you start putting your things together, when that day might come. So what happens, like in my case, I found out 2 years later that all the things I've accumulated, they're actually, I'm using my real estate to pay my premiums, is what I'm doing. And that's really kind of crazy. And I never knew that they were doing that, what surprises me. So it is very, very, very frustrating because I ended up, back in 2014, I was on MSHA. It was a program that the state subsidized for people who, I was always denied insurances. And my wife was on Health Partners. So when 2014, with the Affordable Care Act came around, you were forced to have insurance. And I knew MSHA was going to go away at the end of 2014 because now you weren't denied anything no more. So at that time with open enrollment, I told my wife, let's go down now. We went in March and we looked at open enrollment. So we went to a navigator because I'm not very good at computers. I'm a better farmer than a computer guy. So anyway, we went to a navigator and we went through the whole deal, and he told us, well, bring your tax, you're self-employed, bring your tax. And so I did that. And we got through the whole process, and then he looked at me right in the eye and said, hey,
Good news.
You're getting a raise. I'm getting a raise. What does that mean? He says, well, what do you mean I'm getting a raise? Who are you to give me a raise, And says, well, you're not going to have no more premiums. I says, well, that makes no sense. He says, well, the state will pay your premiums for you. And I was kind of set back by that because there's no free lunch in this world. And so we ended up, we got an MA. Well, a year later, you got to renew. So the time came in 2014, 2015 came, we do MA again. And I didn't really understand it that well, but hey, we're on MA, and it was free, and it was kind of stupid. But then in December 2015, it came time to renew. On the bottom of the paper from Human Services, the little thing saying, you will be charged a lien on your estate after you're deceased. So that's when I found out my real estate was paying my premiums. Boy, was that a shocker. And then try to get through to them, that's a whole nother story.
Well, and what I find a little, I guess, disconcerting about this is that, and Scott, you mentioned this, is that you didn't have that choice of being able to say, okay, do I want to go with this program like this? I mean, because a person might say, well, I'd like to defer those costs till after I pass away because of my circumstances. Sure, I'd like to make that choice. But if you can't make that choice and you can't even decide that you want to go with a different product and pay for it yourself, there seems kind of something quirky about that. Claudia, what's your view on all of this?
Well, I read a story that they wrote on Facebook that was on my friend's page, and my bells went off like, oh my God, duped 55 to 65 estate liens, MA. And I too had I went to a navigator for 2 years, and then this last year they said if you rolled in, if your money increases, then let us know. So I didn't think about it too much, because when I had been on Minnesota Care originally, it would put me in and out of MA all the time. The state would shut down, or different things the state was doing, so I never really paid much attention to it until then. Until I saw this article, and I called the lien division the next day, and a friend of mine got a hold of it first, and he has $57,000 on his home. And when I got a hold of the woman, I had 17, and it went up to 20 within a month.
Wow.
Yeah, and so she said, "Are you aware that you're paying a premium?" I said, "Absolutely not." And she said, "It's $769 a month." And then she said, "And that's not including procedures, seeing a doctor." So everything was put on my home. I don't see doctors, maybe once a year, and I had one little thing done, but there was $20,000 on my home. And the premiums went from $801 to $762 to $769 to $601 for the last 2 years. So I was really shocked and very, very, very angry at what was happening, because it was just so behind your back, and I was just shocked by it all.
Now, John, you mentioned the word hoodwinked. I heard you say that.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think the navigators were also hoodwinked in all of this?
I don't think they knew what they were doing.
Okay.
I really don't. The navigator I had, he was from an insurance company, and he was there helping out. He was in Wisconsin, helping out a navigator in Forest Lake. And I don't think he had no idea that the state was about to do that. Because we were duped into thinking that, well, you didn't see the bottom line. It's in fine print. Well, I was at a navigator's place, because I don't know how to run a computer. Well, he should know what he's doing. If the state's going to hire him to run that show, shouldn't you know the rules? Because whose rules are you playing by?
Right.
That's the problem.
Right. Well, and in thinking back, I recall that, a couple years ago when the programs were first starting to be rolled out, we saw the headlines that said, oh, so many more are being covered. So many more are going to have health care. So many more are going to now be in the fold of being able to have affordable health insurance. So anyway, it doesn't sound like, on one end that they were trying to make it look that way, but on the other end, it really wasn't working out that way. Because to me, a premium of over $800 a month doesn't sound affordable to me.
No.
I mean, especially if you're, a small business owner.
I'm a small business.
Yeah, I don't understand how $800 a month is affordable. That would not be affordable for me.
It's how they lie to us. Because I know when I went to go on there, I was on MSHA, which is a state deal, subsidized by other insurance companies, keep people like me out of the plan because it's subsidized. Cause they pay into it so they can help me with my insurance. MSHA is state run. My wife was on Health Partners. So when we got two of us together, at the time, I was paying MSHA $450 a month premiums, and my wife was $350 a month for Health Partners. So what happened is, once we were approved through MNsure, which was now we're on MA, they said, we'll take her premiums and we'll see how they compare cost-wise. We got a letter back saying they're not cost-effective. 2 years later, I found out they're taking $750 a month out of me and for my wife. $1,500 a month we're paying.
Wow.
It went from $350 to $750. That's not cost-effective in my books. But apparently on the state's books, I don't know who does the books there, but they're not doing mine on fire. I can tell you that right now.
So, I know we've got some viewers out there that are wondering, okay, how did we get here like this in Minnesota? And it's my understanding that it really it started at the federal level, correct? And
Correct.
so who
Yeah.
wants to kind of take our viewers through that about, what happened at that federal level that incentivized states to do exactly what Minnesota did?
Well, when the Affordable Care Act was started, they did a couple of things to make it much easier for people to qualify for medical assistance. One was dropping the asset test. Prior to the Affordable Care Act, there was an asset test to get onto medical assistance. If you had a certain amount of assets, it's like a house or fancy cars or anything like that, machinery, you wouldn't qualify for medical assistance.
Which makes sense because that, again,
Right.
goes to what we've been talking about, that if you're that small business owner and that you've been putting your portion of your income back into your business and to capital assets for that business or land, well, that's where your assets are, is in the land, in your capital assets. And so, right, okay, so
Right.
I understand that. So what they did at the federal level is that they took that test away.
Correct.
So then suddenly, if you had small income but a lot of assets, you could have had $1 million house.
That's correct.
Okay, well, I
It
think
went-
our viewers can understand that's a big change.
Yeah, it went
Okay.
it just went from people that had assets wouldn't qualify to now all of a sudden there was a lot of people with assets being drawn into the medical assistance program because of their low income. The income cap for medical assistance was also raised. Before the Affordable Care Act, it was about 75% of the federal poverty level, and then it went up to 133%, which meant that it almost doubled. You could have almost twice as much income and still qualify for medical assistance. So now you have people with much higher incomes and people with many assets. And remember, this rule, the state lien clause only covers people 55 and older. So these people when you're 55, you generally have a house, it's paid for. You have, if you're a farmer, you have your farm, you have your machinery. So these people now had many, many assets that could be recovered through the estate lien clause.
I see. Well, that's how they made it affordable for the government, right?
Right.
Okay, I got it.
It certainly helped, yes.
Okay, so then at the state level, so then what happened then here in Minnesota at the state level? Who would like to describe that?
From what I understand, the state had the option to go to pursue a state recovery. Certain states, I guess Washington and the state of Oregon, they had some issues when the Affordable Care Act was in the developing stages that they thought that if people knew that they were going to be signing up for some program that would actually impinge upon their estate, that they probably wouldn't take the bait and sign up. So in those two states, they found that people were in fact avoiding signing up initially because nobody wanted to sign up for a program that they knew would be doom for their estate or their heirs. So the states do have that option, but they also had the option not to accept the expansion of Medicaid. The federal government, under the Affordable Care Act, offered states the option to accept the so-called Medicaid expansion, which was the states accepting federal funding to the tune of 100% for all of these capitation amounts. So for everyone at this table that's incurred these liens, these thousands upon thousands of dollars, those amounts have already been paid to the tune of 100% by the federal government. So in doing that, the state is getting reimbursed by the feds up until the year 2018. That's part of the Affordable Care Act. Up until 2018. So the state of Minnesota, not only are they getting 100% reimbursement for these very large capitation or premium amounts each month, they're also pursuing estates. So they're to the exact same sum as the amounts that have already been reimbursed. So there's a double
Yeah,
billing taking place, more or less.
Yeah, so conceivably,
So it's very good
they're getting the money
business.
twice for the same services.
Correct.
Wow. Okay, that is something our legislators should be shocked by. So are they shocked by this?
We're getting the sense that some were not even aware that the estate claim or the estate lien issue existed. Whether or not that they're sincere in that, I don't know. But a number of them have expressed that they didn't even know that that was taking place.
Wow, wow. Well, but of course, you are out there helping people to be aware of this issue. Obviously, being here on Public Access TV is part of that. And you've been up at the legislature because there's a couple of bills that have been presented. And maybe we should tell our viewers a little bit about what those bills are and, what's been going on at the state capitol.
Okay, there is currently amendments to bills, the estate lien clause statutes, so to speak, that are they will remove the estate liens for going forward. In other words, Minnesota will no longer have the estate lien policy for those 55 and older. For long-term care, that will still be in effect, as we've always known. That's more of a historical type of lien. But and then also anyone who has incurred the state liens back to 2014, the beginning of the Affordable Care Act, those liens will be forgiven also. So in other words, none of us would have our liens to have to worry about after we passed away. And in the future, people joining up for medical assistance would then not have to worry about that. Because that's what the problem was. One of the problems was that if people knew about the estate liens, it would definitely be an incentive not to sign up. So that's why a lot of the states did drop it or didn't even accept it, because who would sign up for medical assistance knowing that your house was, everything you worked for your whole life was going to be at risk.
Mm-hmm. Now, does Minnesota, do they have any leeway on saying, well, statewide here we want to put that income cap back down to 75% of the poverty level, that we want to put in that asset test? Claudia?
Well, I think it would be great if they dropped it down. As far as the asset test, I don't know, but I honestly think premiums, should be given. I know that it went up $15,000 to get into to medical assistance, and Minnesota Care went up to $23,000. So if they dropped it down again and made it affordable, and all of us could have premiums, that would be a great way to do it. In my idea of getting on insurance for the state insurance. As far as, what was your other question?
Well, whether or not if the state has that authority to be able to change those caps. And
the asset test is federal law that was dropped. So the state, from my understanding, the state can't reinstate the asset test. So we're sort of handcuffed into that. But I think in terms of the threshold for income, I can't say for sure.
Well, because Scott, you were saying that come 2018, that the federal government is not going to be sending big sums of money to the state of Minnesota to cover the premiums. Okay, so now if the state of Minnesota changes and says, okay, we're not going to have medical assistance liens for this medical insurance coverage, but the federal government's also not giving us a pot of money, okay, are the legislatures now talking about the big financial hole that's going to be created as a result of not doing the medical assistance liens and not getting the big bag of money from the federal government?
Actually, the state will never be responsible for more than 10% of the premium amounts.
Even after 2018?
For right now, up until
Okay.
2018, it's 100% funding, and then after 2018, it's written in some statute or clause somewhere that they will only be responsible for at the most ever 10%.
Oh, I see. So they're still going to get a bag of money. It's
Yep.
just going to be 10% less.
Yes, exactly.
I see. Okay.
I really do believe that the reason why they were not much was said about the estate liens, because there's a lot of people on MA 45, 35, 25 that, and then they don't have no assets, not like we do, and then they turn around, well, someone's going to pay for that, well, guess who is? Guess where that money's coming from? Our estates, and that's what frustrates me. When you try to call some people, sometimes they get downright rude, and then they'll say things like, well, what's your problem? You're going to be dead. And I've heard that before too. You're going to be gone, so what's the difference?
That's quite common.
And that's a pretty tough comment.
That's
you're
very
going to be gone.
callous.
Well, yeah, and then plus someone's got to pay for it. So I mean, when you get stuff like that, and that's if you get through to them. That's what really frustrates me and all of us here, because they treat our assets like, well, they didn't earn it, we did. But if you're going to make a big bill and use us to pay for it, I don't find that.
Well, and what I think is so important in any kind of program, whether it's this or some other program, is that you have the transparency that's necessary so that whoever's participating in that program can make a decision.
Right.
Do I want to participate in this? What are the consequences for me if I do, if I don't? Do I want to just, in this case, do I want to just pay the penalty for not having insurance and be self-funded for a year or two? Or do I want to pay premiums to a different insurance company because that's what I need to do? Or do I want to forego that and let it be a medical assistance lien because, well, right now I need to defer that to the future because things will be better in the future and then I'll take care of it then. See, but a person can't really make that decision the way it was set up. You don't have any choice at all. No. It's either you go down the check blanks and it leads you to this conclusion, and that's all there is. And now here we are today.
Well, that's what's so frustrating to me. I mean, being from Hugo, Senator Representative Matt Dean is in my jurisdiction here, and I talked to him personally. And what made me mad, I will make trips out to Washington County Courthouse in Stillwater and figure this out. And none of this came to my attention until end of December of 2015. Then when I seen Scott's name in the paper in February about what he's going through, and Rick, I got in the bandwagon and called him on the clear blue sky. I said, what's this all about? And then when I went down to Stillwater, that's when I found out you got choices to make. In all reality, you don't have choices to make, because what happens is when you go to your navigator and they say, okay, your income says you're this. Well, you go to your county level and they say, here's how MNsure works. You got to get on or you get penalized. So your income falls here. Well, my income fell in MA 3 years in a row. Well, what happened is I can't choose. I said, I'll give you MinCare. Nope, you're MA. So you're on MA. So you're stuck there, and you can't get out of it. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah,
no, get out of jail free.
No.
Yeah, we're finding also that folks that were on Minnesota Care through the MNsure site, they were paying a low monthly premium for their Minnesota Care coverage, and then they found out that they suddenly weren't
slid into MA?
Yeah, they were
They're on
slid
MA all of a
into
sudden.
medical assistance without their knowledge. We have a contact out of Hinckley, and she said that she actually got her premiums, her small premiums from paying her Minnesota Care premium, returned to her, and without any explanation of any sort, and found out then, now recently, that the reason for that was they dropped her into medical assistance without her knowledge, and she had then since incurred around $40,000 between her and her husband.
Right.
Wow.
And she was never told by anyone, never got any mailing. She just got the check for the small premium amount back.
And that is another problem.
Yeah,
with the,
yeah, right. It seems like there's a connection. Folks that have had trouble slipping down into MA that were actually paying a premium on Minnesota Care.
And without their actually asking to do so.
Not even acknowledged
And
it.
that's what is also
don't
then
get asked.
troubling, that you think that you are signed into a particular program, it's going along, and then some bureaucrat someplace has suddenly decided that they're going to shift you to somewhere else, sort of like a shell game that you're not really a part of, and you didn't get to say, well, I want to go to square one instead of square two.
Sure.
That's awful.
Well, Scott, when I talked to you back in February, you tried to pay it back. And he said, they couldn't, you're not dead yet. And he couldn't pay it back. He wanted to pay back his wife's, whatever they incurred against their estate, but they wouldn't let him pay it back. There's no department to send a check to.
Yeah, that was one of the
You tried to pay it back.
original tactics of mine was I went and I said, I want to pay this amount off. At that time, it was $11,000. Get it out of my life. And they said, well, you can't pay it back because it's not a lien. there's no lien until after you're dead. So they're playing with the nebulous nature. It's an estate claim. It's not a lien until after you're dead, and we ran into that when we appealed Ellen's decision recently about the lack of their accounting being straightforward in terms of the threshold levels of your income. We were on medical assistance, we were on Minnesota Care, we were getting estate claims. At one point, we were actually paying triple premiums. We were getting the monthly, the small Minnesota Care premium. We were getting a capitation amount of $750 a month, and then the federal backup of that with the funding under the expansion of Medicaid. So yeah, there was a triple whammy, a trio of funds ending up in the state's treasury
Wow.
at certain points in 2015.
So when you're talking about then this being basically nebulous because you haven't really passed away yet, so it's not really hasn't become a lien
Nope.
actually lodged against your property. Let me ask you this: does it accrue interest during all of this nebulous time?
No, it does not.
Okay. Because I could almost see that be the next thing you were going to tell me is that, okay, we've also got nebulous interest accruing.
As we understand it, at the point where you pass away and the recovery folks are there to pick at your carcass, so to speak, they then, until the estate is settled, the estate lien can accrue interest during that time until it's settled.
Okay.
But you have to be dead first.
And that is a worry of a lot of the people, that by having these liens or the claims, I guess, placed against your estate, that the state can do whatever they want in this time period before you die. You know, like many of the numbers have changed. You know, the liens have gone up. They've never gone down that I've known of, but they've gone up. And then, should they decide to start applying lien or retroactive, or interest, and then retroactive interest maybe. So that's one of the worries, and that's why, like, Scott wanted to pay it off, because just to get this worry that these numbers could change without you knowing about it.
Now, I understand that we have a caller on the line. So let's bring our caller to the table and see if they have a question or comment. Thank you for calling in. Hello.
Hello, I have two questions.
Good.
First of all, could you please tell me the future funding for MinCare? My understanding is the provider tax is ending soon or something like that, and what is being discussed to take its place there. And then secondly, for the first time in a long time with MinCare, there have been some recent increases for out-of-pocket expenses or deduct. You got to pay now $20 for a visit, and your cost of prescription drugs has gone up. And what have you heard about that?
Okay, good questions. Thank you very much. Who would like to take a stab at the first question?
Those questions kind of relate to Minnesota Care, and so we're really not familiar with that aspect.
Okay.
They, like the provider tax is like they're rescinding that or whatever. Yeah, we don't know where that funding's coming from.
I know there's been some discussion in the legislature about, as it's called, the Minnesota Care cliff in terms of the income level. There's a point where the amount that you can earn drops very sharply. So there's very small group of people that actually qualify for Minnesota Care. In terms of the provider tax and the funding, I'm not, I don't think anybody at the table
we're
here
not,
is
we're not really.
in that.
We just know what happened to us.
Yeah.
Because we were on
And that was
MS.
on medical assistance.
assistance.
Right.
That's right. And the caller brought up the issue, of course, of the increase in co-pays, and certainly I can see where that might be one way that there's going to be a way to help with some kind of a funding gap. But there, again, you also have that question about when do you get to that point when co-pays are too much, too, because you got to think about, it's all sort of a balancing act in all of that. So, caller, thank you for your questions. Sorry that we don't really have clear answers for you, but it would be a great idea for another show. And so
yeah.
certainly if you have some ideas about maybe some guests we can have on here to talk about that aspect of healthcare in Minnesota, just get a hold of me on Facebook and we'll get them on here. That would be a great topic.
It'd be good because no one from the state's going to call you or tell you this is how it's run. Because I'll guarantee that no one's going to tell you exactly what's going down because they don't want you to know. But I spend time at the county level to the point where I go in there and they're like, oh God, here he is again. They don't want to see me because I ask too many questions. And I found out that when he actually showed the paper, here's the income guidelines. If you don't want this, here's where you got to be. If you don't want that, here's where you got to be. Well, so you're trying at home trying to figure out your income preparation to figure out how you're going to do this, where you're going to fall. But I do know in the MinCare level, where I would have been more income, your premiums were like about $100 a month, $75 a month. Your co-pays are like $10 for this, $25 for that. Well, that's not bad. That's pretty reasonable. But then I told them, well, okay, we all know that you can't get insurance for $100 a month. Who's paying the rest? Is the MA paying it? Oh, no. The state ends up, well, in Scott's case, he was getting slid into that. People were getting slid from MinCare to MA. But they were telling us that, and then it's kind of funny because there's no way. They're lying to you. What happened, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I was so frustrated, and I said, well, that's what I want. I want MinCare. Can't have it. Your income's right here.
And that's what I was trying to say. They raised the bar from 15,000 for MA, and then the window is 8,000, and so you'd have to go in at 16,000 to show if you're self-employed. That's it, and 23 is the highest. So it's just in that frame for Minnesota Care. So when you come in under that, they just put anybody in MA. Without your knowledge, because I went in under Minnesota Care, and I was not aware that I was in MA
they slide
until
you.
this year. Yeah,
they play kick the can, and you're the can.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Now, we probably have some viewers out there that are wondering, gosh, I wonder if there's one of these nebulous medical assistance liens on my property. How can they find that information? Let's give them some ideas on what kind of research can they do to find out if they're in a pickle or not, if this applies to them or not.
The Department of Human Services, which oversees all of this, they have a recovery unit. That's the department that when you pass away, they will get your Social Security number and they will look for your assets and come and recover them or take them. That number, we don't have it right here, but it's the recovery unit of the Department of Human Services. That's who you would call to find out. Like if you're on medical assistance and you're over 55, you probably most likely have a lien against your property.
And generally there is a recovery office in every county in the state, in the local offices too, that folks could contact from whatever county they happen to live in. Another interesting little quirk of the whole scenario is trying to disenroll. Once you've found this out and you want to disenroll, we had a call from a contact up in St. Louis County, and the fellow, he was on medical assistance, and he saw the article in the Duluth News Tribune in February, and he immediately called his local Department of Human Services and wanted to disenroll because he wasn't quite 55 years old until the month of March. So he knew this was coming, and he wanted to bail and just pay the fine for not having any insurance. And he couldn't. It wasn't during open enrollment. Yeah. He knew he was going to get capitation amounts, the fake premium amount every month. Once he turned 55, against his estate, he wanted to bail, and they wouldn't let him. And I think Claudia can speak as firsthand knowledge.
I went down when I found out about all this, was February 15th, and I went down and I had a conversation with them, and of course nobody in Mincher knew anything I was talking about, other than they said she's very upset and talking law, crimes. And so I went back a week later, and I made a decision to get off of Mincher. And so the guy said to me, it was like 4 days before the end of the month, and it was the 25th I was down, and he had me closed on February 29th. And I have a document closed. They kept it going, and they kept taking capitations off the back.
Wow.
Like a gopher. Chew your leg off. You get
Yeah, and so when I would call them, they'd say, "Yeah, it's still open. It's still occurring. Premium or capitations," and I could not get on.
It seems laughable, but we brought that up at one of the committee
Well,
hearings that Claudia was
yeah,
testifying
and
in
at
St.
the
Paul.
very end, Miss Mack said to me, "Miss Broussard,
We're
you can't
surprised.
get off." So my recommendation to you is to keep calling DHS because you can't get off. And as Matt Dean said, well, this is the Hotel California,
Oh, yes.
That's when he,
You can't
made
ever
that.
leave.
You can't leave.
Wow.
It's-
So
it's
I
not
tried to get
easy.
off, and you couldn't get off.
No.
Took almost a week on the phone for myself to get
Right.
myself and Ellen disenrolled.
Wow.
It was not easy.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Now, for our viewers out there, I do have that contact information where you can reach the Minnesota DHS recovery section, the phone number. So I'll give you a moment to get your pen and paper, and then I'll give you that number. So I will mention that to you. So I'm going to give you a couple more seconds. Tick, 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 tick. Okay, so there's two numbers. One is a 651 number, so that's 651-431-3204. Or if you want to call the 1-800 number, that's 1-800-657-3963. And a little later, before the end of the program in 15 minutes, we will give those numbers once more. So let's talk a little bit about what happened at the Capitol. Talk about your experience testifying at the Capitol, about the response that you received, the questions that were given to you. How did that go?
One of the major things initially was during the Senate Human Services Committee, I believe it was, where Senator Tony Longrie, who happens to be our local senator from Carrick, Minnesota, he had brought forth a bill that would address it. And one of the main topics that day was the lack of disclosure upon the initial sign-up. The navigators that help people to sign up, or people that signed up online because they had evidently been able to get through the glitches. They claim, the DHS claims that there was disclosure at that time, that the liens were a reality or in the system, but none of us has come across anyone yet that has said that they knew about it at sign up. So that was key at that first hearing. It sounded like that among the senators in that committee hearing, there were maybe two that understood that it actually existed. So the disclosure among the legislators themselves is very, very unclear. So
Well, I talking to Representative Matt Dean from my district. After telling him my story, he was really. He felt, I'm sorry putting you through this, because MNsure it was portrayed as a perfect scenario. Paul Bunyan riding across a lake, everything's gonna be taken care of. Well, that's not good. And then like I told Mr. Dean, he says, if you can get this estate thing away, it'd be great. You're probably not going to fix it by the legislation session. It's a big animal to fix. It's broke pretty bad. But we got to address it, like our group here, that they're just robbing from us or stealing from us. And it's not just a few people. There's 83,000 people in America, in Minnesota, that's affecting it right now. So if you don't think you're getting bit, you probably are, just not that hard yet. It affects a lot of people that are in there and they probably don't even know it. And then I told Mr. Dean, something got to be done.
So, and then talk a little bit about, how many days of testimony were there? I mean, exactly, what were some of the other questions besides asking about the disclosures and of course, hearing your story?
Well, there was, it was brought up all the different aspects of this that aren't quite legitimate. I mean, first you've got the 55-year-old, it's 55 and over. If you're 54, you don't get a lien placed against your property. If you're 55, you do. Well, that's, the 14th Amendment's supposed to guarantee protection, equal protection, under any law that's, put out. And there was also many, many rules. There's a federal rule that was supposed to be followed for notifying people at their initial sign-up, and that's a federal procedural rule for medical assistance. That was ignored. Minnesota has a statute that says that the agency should inform people also. So there was many, many different aspects of warnings and protections for the people that were enrolling that were not followed, and that's how you ended up with all these people not knowing, that this was even happening. So the non-disclosure was the biggest thing, because that denied everybody the ability to make a decision whether they wanted to use their assets as premium payments or whether they wanted to opt out to something else.
So it's fascinating that actually at the federal level there was the requirement for that notification.
Yes.
And yet that wasn't followed then as it came down to the state level.
Well, none of us would have signed up for something like that.
Right.
I mean, I like I said before when we first started, our farm's been in the family for over 100 years. I'm not going to sit here idle and watch my farm go down the road. Simple as that. It's not going to happen. Something's gonna happen, or there's gonna be hell to pay somewhere. I mean, I don't know what's gonna happen. It's just frustrating. It's frustrating for all of us. Very frustrating.
So where do you see the current legislation going? Do you think that there's enough support that it's going to pass? I mean, is this a bipartisan issue? Do you see that you have more support from Republicans versus Democrats, or more support from Democrats versus Republicans? What's kind of the political makeup of this animal?
It seems like the Senate, their bill is called 2501, Senate File 2501. That one, I think, will be probably worked through some more. To the House companion bill it's a omnibus bill. It's gotten a host of other bills thrust into this omnibus bill. So I'm not sure.
That sounds like disaster.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that's
It grew a lot of legs and arms, let's put it that way.
Right. And so, of course, the Republicans would like to stick it to the Democrats because of the MNsure aspect. Look what MNsure has done to these folks. And the Democrats, of course, they don't want to backpedal too much from MNsure because it's sort of a crown jewel, as it were.
It's their baby.
And a very expensive $300 million crown jewel. But to walk away from it now would probably be hard to swallow for anyone. So they've got that working in their day-to-day work, but it impacts us in a very real way.
Yes.
So hopefully the politicizing of the issue will get hammered out among them.
Do you think there's any hope that it's going to pass sometime soon, or hard to say?
They're supposed to have it wrapped up by March or May 23rd. That's the end of the session. And the problem is that the bill by itself would have been fine. Both sides, the House and the Senate, are all in agreement that this should not have happened, that 55-year-olds should not be, have any other penalties than anybody else. So that's kind of agreed upon by the entire legislature. The problem is that they put it into this omnibus bill, and that, of course, means that there's 80 other bills attached to this thing. And so in order for it to pass, and the one was to dismantle MNsure on the House side. And so the Democrats will never go for that. So now you got this fight going on. So basically it's become a partisan issue, not just about our issue. It's become a big issue.
Right. Well, and as you indicated, John, it's grown arms and legs to it. So.
And that's what I'm saying, and it grew a lot, and that's a problem. And then they're both going to arm wrestle. It's saying who's the strongest. The ones I've talked to, they feel bad for us. Gee, we're in charge of the state, and look what we did to you guys. And guess what? You blew it. But you know what? Like I told Matt Dean, says, you're not going to fix it by the end of the session, but you got to do something proactive. Something's got to happen here.
The most egregious part of it should be at least addressed.
At least addressed. And like the one thing what really worried me is that they talked about maybe we'll give you the ability to pay it back. Do I have the ability to pay back? If I'm about $40,000 now. Do I have the ability to pay back $40,000 by the time I'm 65? Hell no. I don't have that ability. They're taking out $1,500 a month. Nowhere in my budget on the farm is there something, okay, this needs $1,500 this month. You know, maybe seed and come May now, but that's something you can use. So far since I've been paying, I had a colonoscopy. I paid $20,000 for a colonoscopy. That's a lot.
That's a lot
and that's,
of money.
That's where the system's broke. And like I told Matt Dean, it's not going to get fixed. Don't try and do it because you're going to have a problem with the Democratic side. But here's the deal. You've got to come up with a solution. You've got to at least start with the MA people who, like us who have the assets who are getting killed on this situation. And that's what's got to be. That's got to start now. We'll fix it later. You know, but
So our viewers out there, of course, they can get on board with this issue, can't they?
oh heavens, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, they're
and how can they do that?
They-
Get a hold of
calling
it.
out. Use your hotline phone because you'll wait a long time to get someone who'll tell you what's going on. But you gotta be persistent. You gotta be like us guys. You gotta get on the phone and don't. If they say someone, if they go to transfer you, get a number so you can call in.
Right, so you don't end up just talking into dead space, listening to
No.
a song in the
No.
distance. Now, with the last 2 minutes that we have, I want to give those numbers once again, so that way you can get a hold of the Minnesota Department of Human Services in the recovery section. 651-431-3204. Or the 1-800 number, 1-800-657-3963. So those are the numbers you can call to find out if there's one of those nebulous MA liens wandering around out in the Ethernet waiting for you to pass away. So
Call your legislature. Call
Yes.
who represents you. Get them on board. Don't let them hide behind the curtain. Get them on board.
good advice, good advice. So in the last minute that we have here, any besides that wake-up call to all of our viewers to get on the phone, any other last comments about what you want to, how you want to sum this up, or what you want people to know?
I guess what I would like to see out of this whole thing is for the over 82,000 Minnesotans either know about these liens and especially get them removed. I mean, that's it. This is, close. If you figure the people that have already turned 66, 67 within the last 2 years, you've probably got over 100,000 Minnesotans, many of which don't even know this exists is happening to them. I just, to get this out is the main thing, and to get these things removed, those are the two things.
Yeah, I think that the DHS, they hoped beyond hope that the only people that would ever find out about this would be the heirs of people that have died, because once we will have died, how do you defend against it? Your heirs don't know what was going on. So I think the only way that this program would have gone smoothly would be for no one to ever find out about it, because then it was working just fine for them.
Right, because the heirs more than likely would have thought, well, their relative made that decision, and that was what they decided at the time. And you're right. How would you fight it? Yeah.
So that's you were not meant to find
Claudia
out
or
while you're
John,
alive.
any last comments from you?
I'm with Rick and all this, and I believe that everybody should be made aware of what's going on, and that there are a lot of people hurting with this right now that have no clue. And I would like to see them be proactive and make the calls to the department and find out what's going on.
DHS won't
Yeah.
tell you.
No. And you'll hear the old story. Well, they sold the farm, they paid the funeral home, or not the funeral home, the nursing home. I can deal with that. I'm living in my house tonight, or assisted living, or a nursing home. But to use my real estate to pay my premiums,
Right.
no.
Right,
That-
right.
that-
Especially when you're a small business,
Right,
and that small
right.
business is still earning income for you during this
Right.
part of your life.
Right.
Right.
It's not what it was
exactly.
intended for.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you all for being out here for
Thank
Off
you.
the Record
Thank you.
News.
Thank you for hearing
It's
us.
been a
Yes,
very
thank you.
enjoyable
Thanks for the
conversation.
opportunity.
Yes, and to our viewers out there, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Off the Record News. We'll see you again next week with a new program. Until then, bye-bye.